The tramp of marching feet gradually subsides as the armies finish moving into position around the edges of the Bane. But before they advance any further, small teams are being sent out. Yes, scouts to spy out the enemy dispositions, but also small teams of diplomats heading out to enemy commanders in order to begin negotiations. Yes, today on Dragon's Teeth, in the latest Bane Wars update, before we get to the war, there's going to be some jaw. Hi, I'm Rob Poyton. Thanks for joining me today for this quick update on Phase 2 of Bane Wars. So, we have our armies formed. Their armies are all in place, and I have received news of the disposition of the various forces around the edge of the Bane. Let's take a quick look at the map. We can see the Orcs to the north there. Now, they didn't hold on to a lot of territory following their defeat last time. They're basically clustered around their home base. If we go clockwise around to the vampires, they penetrated quite deeply into the Bane in Phase 1. They reached the City of Ghosts, where they have a considerable force. They have another smaller force at the volcanoes, and their new army, of course, just coming into the Bane on their border as well. The High Elves have got a couple of forward outposts, and their new main forces also coming onto their border. Down to the south we have the Dwarves, who had a bit of a tough time in Phase 1. They were forced to retreat out of their mining operation, out of their fortress. They're regrouping, I guess is the way to describe that, around their home fortress on the border there, and of course that's where their new army is awaiting orders. If we go around a little to those, we have the Human Fortress. This is an NPC clan, so I'm not going to say too much more about them at the moment. They've had some dealings with the Fire Elves, who are their neighbours if we continue round. Fire Elves, of course, were all the way over the Bane, or most of it. They've got that central position of the Dwarven mine. They've got the fortress to the south, so they've got a lot of territory to cover, and their new army is just coming into play now. And just up to the north of those, we have the Brotherhood of the Bear. Similarly, got control of a fortress and their sacred lands, of course. So we might say that the board is set, all the pieces are ready. Before we get into the first lot of movement, we are starting with turn 0. This is a diplomatic and espionage phase. Each clan receives 150 gold pieces to spend on espionage at the start of Phase 2. They allot a monthly spend. So if they want to put 10 gold pieces into spying, that will cover them for 1 month or 4 turns. Each turn is a week. So that spend, if it's espionage, can be targeted towards another clan. So the vampires might say, we want to spy out that Dwarven fortress. We're going to spend 20 gold pieces on seeing if we can infiltrate it, get some people in there, find out what's going on, that sort of thing. Now, they can also allocate money to counter espionage. This doesn't have to be specific, because counter espionage is just applied to your forces in general. If the vampires have spent 20 gold pieces on spying that fortress, but the dwarves have spent 50 gold pieces on counter espionage, then the vampires are probably not going to find out very much. There will be a dice roll made, and depending on how that goes, will give the measure of success or failure. So an exceptional dice roll might bring some success, a partial success. A poor dice roll will likely mean those spies or scouts are captured and no doubt imprisoned and questioned. Of course, espionage doesn't have to be spying. We can have spreading discontent or rumours among the ranks. We can have an assassination attempt on a commander or a general or hero, that kind of thing. So, there's a few different options. Alongside that, we have our diplomacy running as well. So this could take the form of a message received by a carrier pigeon or a carrier eagle or whatever it is. and the commander will read that and write an answer and send it back. Or it could be you get a little party of diplomats turn up, diplomatic immunity, that's very important, and the two sides can engage in a conversation about, well, look, we'd like you to do this, if you do that, we'll do this, that kind of thing. So that's turn 0, that's happening now, even as we speak. I'm already getting messages coming in saying, oh, I'd like to do this and I'd like to do that. I'll get reports back for those this coming week, and then we'll get into turn 1, which is where the armies actually start moving and manoeuvring. Now, I don't know how long it's going to take before armies come into any sort of contact. You know, once an army is a couple of hexes away, then we get into those options of talk, fight or flight pretty much, and we can potentially move to the tabletop there, whether that's a full battle or whether that's some sort of skirmish. And of course, in the meantime, there may well be other events happening. We've got that NPC clan down to the south. There are some areas that have not been explored yet in the Bane. Who knows who or what may live there, or what artifacts may be found. There are some other clans and creatures that were discovered in Phase 1, such as gargoyles and centaurs, and maybe one or two other things as well. So there's potential interaction going on there as well. And of course, you never know what objectives the clans have and how those objectives might change as certain things are discovered. Because the interesting thing with this, as I've said before, is it's not like I've written out a whole book of lore for this. This is not like if I was producing a TV series, for example, you start with the Bible, right? They write what they call a Bible, which means if this happens in episode 1, then we've got to be consistent with that. We can't have a character, killed off in episode 1, and then, suddenly there they are in episode 5, without a good explanation, of course. So to build up that internal consistency. Now, there's an element of that, but also because we're getting input from all of the players, that lore, if you like, is quite fluid. And the players are coming up with some very good ideas, which I'm incorporating in as I go along. So there is an element of winging it, of course, but that's the beauty of doing fantasy. Well, it's also the beauty of doing historical wargaming, because of course you can do exactly the same thing, and I know some people do, like Henry has a great campaign going on, whether you want to put that in Napoleonic or medieval or 20th century, it's a very nice way to develop the campaign as an option, of course, to trying to recreate an actual campaign. Like you might want to try and recreate the Normandy landings or the Battle for Normandy, or we see Arnhem is done quite a lot, Desert War campaigns, all that sort of stuff. So in those, obviously, you're a little bit more bound by history if you choose to be, but if the campaign setting is of your own making, or if you're adapting a historical setting, then you have freedom to throw these little bits in, these little curveballs, which I think makes for a more interesting game. Now, as far as the vampire army goes, because I am running the vampire army, of course, I've got a few more figures in. I'm going to put those up on my fantasy playlist because, as usual, I've had quite a few new fantasy figures come in. And the 10 mils, I've got some really nice ones. And the people that I ordered from also very kindly sent me a free figure as well, which is of a necromancer riding a chariot pulled by zombies. I'll show you that in my next fantasy chat, which will be coming up later this week. Keep an eye out for that. So there we go, that's all to come. If you'd like to keep track of what's going on in Phase 2 of the Bane Wars, then please do click the subscribe button below. That will keep you informed with the latest developments as things hot up. And of course, as always, I'm very pleased to hear any questions or suggestions you have, particularly if you've run your own campaigns in the past. Any little tips or tweaks, the more devious the better. I'm always glad to hear those. Alright, I'm off to pen a diplomatic missive to a certain clan leader. I'll see you next time.